Hi there, I'm Richard Hill, the host of eCommerce One, and welcome to episode 180. 180 in the bank. So, in this episode, I speak with Jason Nyhus, President of Shopware. We cover what we call the mid-market, the 10 to 250 million turnover. It's about 50% of the actual e-commerce market, so a huge market. We talk Jason's advice to mid-market companies right now and why mid-sized companies are more risk-averse. How can senior managers get buy-in from above when trying to transform digital operations? And the overall appetite right now for moving platforms and the core things to consider over the timeline and planning phase. Now, if you enjoyed this episode, hit the subscribe or follow button wherever you're listening to this podcast so you're always the first to know when a new episode is released. Now, let's head over to this fantastic episode. Hi, Jason. How you doing?
I am wonderful. Thank you for having me, Richard.
No problem at all. Thank you for coming on the show. So I think best thing to do is let's crack right on and introduce yourself to our listeners and how you got into the world of e-commerce.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Jason Nyhus, and I'm general manager here at Shopware. It's a company I'm sure we'll get into quite a bit later. But I've been in e-commerce for 20 some odd years, and for the listeners, my hair looked a lot like yours when I started, and now it's got a lot different. It's a stressful industry, but man, has it been a great ride.
Yeah, so 20 years, that's a hell of a ride, isn't it? It's almost from the beginning, I think, pretty much, maybe 5 years short. So obviously you've seen quite a lot of different things come and go and things change, and obviously a lot of things, a lot of crazy growth with different companies that you work with. But I think $1 million question on a lot of growing e-commerce store companies and merchants is, choosing a platform. It's usually there. We've had all the platforms on, I think, on the podcast, and they all have their lovely take on life. And and I think we've had we were chatting just before you came on, and we were dealing with some of your very, very, very first merchants in the UK with Shopware. But obviously, there's a few options out there. How can a growing e-commerce store make sure they're sort of making the right choice for them? Whether it's Shopware or an other platform.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I think we should talk about is the fact that there are 18 different commerce platforms on the Gartner Magic Quadrant. And if you are a merchant who really focuses on building great products and services and marketing those, to look at the Gartner Magic Quadrant has to be incredibly intimidating. I mean, how would you even know who to talk to and why? And so, the first thing I would tell you is that every one of those providers, us included, is purpose-built for certain types of companies. And we like to call that the ideal customer profile, or the ICP for short.
Yeah.
And, Shopware is actually very, very purpose-built for the mid-market. And that's really unique. Brands who do, between 10 and $100 million in GMV are largely left behind by traditional commerce businesses. There are plenty of platforms that build for the masses, think SMB, and there are plenty of platforms who build for the megas, but there's not many who build purposely for the mid-market.
Yeah, so that mid-market size have got very unique challenges, make up to that size of business, whether that's sort of infrastructure, the sort of a level of capacity going through the website, all the different channels that a store may have. But what are some of the key levers that you see in the sort of decision why they choose maybe Shopware or why they choose a certain platform when you're doing 20, 30, 40 million? What are some of the key things to be thinking about?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the way that the trap we all fall into is we talk about merchants by how much gross revenue they do online. And it's the laziest way that you can possibly do it. And we do it too. But the fact is, the real kind of decision point is around complexity. And it's around how you want to pay for it, whether it's an OpEx expense or a CapEx expense. It's around the number of people in your company who have to interact and touch this product to make it do what you need. Those are the real kind of decisioning factors, more than just how much revenue do you do. We like to say that Shopify, as an example, is one of the greatest boxes ever invented for commerce. And if your business fits nicely in that box, you should probably buy from them. They give merchants that are really small the economic scale of a business that's much larger. Okay, and so for those reasons, if your business fits in that box, you buy from them. Shopware does an amazing job for the merchant who has enterprise expectations in terms of capabilities, flexibility, supporting their complexity, but they have potentially the budget of an SMB. And it's that conflict between what they need and what they can afford. That's who the Shopware merchant is, and that's where we really excel and do a great job.
Yeah, no, it's a good market. That's a lot of our clients, and it's more of a customizable, bigger thinking. Like I say, it's not just about revenue, is it? There's so many different levers there. Whether there's, you might be talking, you might start off with 1 or 2 channels, running Google Shopping in one country, but next thing you know, you're running 50 channels. That's a different game altogether, isn't it? A different requirement of complexity with 200,000 SKUs and, maybe 20 countries and 50, 100 channels running. Shopify out of the box is going to have some fun and games with that, isn't it? I would imagine.
Yeah. Well, this is why another example of why GMV or gross merchandise value is not a great measure. There are, take the Kardashian brands that I think some of those run on Shopify. We're talking about 8 to 10 SKUs, a small number of countries, and a really simple buying experience. Even though they do hundreds of millions of GMV, their complexity does not necessitate anything different than a Shopify.
Yeah. Understood. So, sorry, carry on.
Oh, I was just going to say, and then you have examples of brands who may do 25 million, but they own 4 or 5 different brands. They serve, they do B2B and B2C, and they serve 10 to 15 different countries. Well, if you get to that level of, it's a factorial problem, well, then to buy a solution like a Shopify where you have to pay kind of per channel and country, and you have to manage them all separately, well, that no longer makes sense. It doesn't fit your business problem. And so really the complexity is a better measure.
Yeah, no, I like it. So I know you've published recently the Forgotten Mid-Market Report. So what does that sort of say around the sort of state of e-commerce at the moment? What were the key findings from that?
Well, so the report is called The Journey of the Mid-Market Merchant, and it was published by Rick Watson, RMW Research. It's a really great report. And it was not published by Shopware, but funded. The research was paid for by Shopware. And the reason we went off and did that is because a lot of software companies go out and try and do thought leadership. But the thought leadership always comes back with a piece that talks about a total economic impact study that always paints the platform in an unbelievably positive light. That's because they control all the inputs.
Yeah.
And, we didn't want to play that game. We wanted to start a new conversation about the mid-market merchant that simply wasn't happening. And so the research really goes in and starts to take a look at the market forces that have contributed to how we got here. The fact that in 2016 was supposed to be the year that commerce grew up. Okay, this is the year that big software was going to start to take over e-commerce. So what happened in and around that year? Adobe acquires Magento. Salesforce acquires Demandware. SAP acquires Hybris. So in the leader quadrant that year, you've got Salesforce, Adobe, SAP, IBM, and Oracle, along with my previous employer, Digital River. So what happens then in the bottom left, again, on the magic quadrant, the one box you don't want to be in is the bottom left, the niche player. Okay, 2016. You see players like Shopify and BigCommerce. My employer, Shopware, wasn't even on it. Okay?
Yeah.
So the reason we commissioned this research around the journey of the mid-market merchant was all those solutions I talked about before, all were purpose-built for the mid-market. And guess what happened? Big money came in, took those solutions, raise the price, raise the security, raise the selling team, blah, blah, blah. And now those products really don't serve that market at all.
Yeah.
And what the market really told us was that they really valued the simplicity, easy to buy, easy to run, easy to own of the BigCommerce, of the Shopify. And so fast forward to today, what you have left is really the forgotten middle market. You've got roughly 50% of the e-commerce market falls in the range of a revenue of between 10 million and 250 million of GMV. 50% of the market. Yet nobody's explicitly marketing and selling and providing services to that category. So that's really why we did it, and a little bit about the insights related to it.
So what would you say were a couple of the key takeaways from it then? So we're saying that it's like a forgotten area, and I agree. I think it's doesn't get talked about too much, but it's a huge part of the overall market. Would you say 50%? So that's a 50% of the revenue, I'm assuming. Obviously, that is a huge part of any. If you're a tech partner listening in, obviously that's a huge area to be in. That's going to be potential clients and customers that are they're not used to paying, what is it, $49 for Shopify a month. They're used to paying whatever it may be, for various services. If you're doing 20, 30 million, what would you say are some of the key takeaways then from the actual report? Obviously, there's this market, there's these players, but what is some of the takeaways from it?
Well, a lot of it really centers on what's happened post-acquisition to things like Magento and Salesforce Demandware. And it doesn't explicitly say it in the report, but this is kind of when I read it, it's kind of how I imply. The companies who acquired these businesses, again, back to Hybris, Magento, and Salesforce Demandware. Again, all those products were purpose-built for the mid-market. When they got acquired by ERP, CRM, and experience management companies, if you have contracts with any of those companies, what happens is they've found ways to increase how much you pay over time on all of their core services. And in commerce, what's happened is everybody's kind of moved to cloud delivery mechanisms. Yeah. Everybody's kind of moved to a percentage of GMV model. And what's happened is the percentage of GMV has actually retracted over time. And so if you're a Salesforce, Adobe, or SAP senior executive trying to make decisions around the product roadmap and where you put your R&D as a company, you put it towards the things that have expanding margin and expanding growth, and you take it away from places that don't. And in this scenario, commerce has been that. So what the report really starts to highlight is the fact that some of these players that used to be the market leaders have really lost a lot of share over time. And it's really because they haven't delivered new features that have really addressed the needs of the mid-market merchant. And here's a question I ask analysts and merchants who are running these platforms. In the last 5 years, tell me your favorite net new features you got out of these commerce platforms. Yeah. Not apps that you can now extend and pay the money to run services.
No. What added value have you got? Yeah.
Most of the research and development has gone towards making them run, maybe optimize a little bit better, but not gone towards delivering new features that allow you to compete with your competitors better.
Yeah.
And so that's what the report starts to highlight. It's when there's no money, when there's no focus, when there's no energy, there's no value being delivered. That's really what it says.
Yeah, no, I get it. And I think that's the thing. People can get a little bit complacent, can't they? Or companies can, when you've got these big retainers in place. But ultimately, there's always other brands nipping at your heels that are developing, adding value. If you're, let's say, 50 million revenue, you can't just sit on your existing tech stack and expect to, what works in that tech stack now. Hang on a minute. We talked about different channels. Well, if that tech stack is only enabled the feed technology that works with your platform only works in certain countries. Hang on a minute, you're discounting a whole country, or if it's just very difficult to launch other channels, whether that's Shopee and Amazon or the wider, different countries have obviously got, you've got a lot of big channels in the US that, if you open up from as a UK merchant, it might seem quite alien when you're 2 or 3 million, but they're the sort of channels that you need to be in when you're hitting the 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 million, and shipping all around the world. But if you're not able to do that, the B2B piece, that user experience around flipping from B2B, B2C to B2B, and you've got to then pay another, whatever, $2,000 a month for this, $2,000 for that, $4,000 for this, whatever it may be. Yep. It soon becomes quite costly, doesn't it? Yeah. I just wanted to introduce you very quickly to our sponsors, Pricing. Now, Pricing is a competitor price tracking and monitoring software that can dynamically change a product's prices on all sales channels. They work with brands such as Samsung, Sony, Suzuki to increase their online revenue. Now, if you run Google Shopping, which I know a lot of you absolutely do, this software is absolutely key to accelerating profits. One of the reasons I recommend Pricing to my clients is because you can find out your competitors' pricing and stock availability all in one simple to understand dashboard, giving you a huge competitive advantage. Now, if you have any inquiries and questions about this software, or you're ready to get cracking, we have worked out a very, very special deal for our listeners where you can get a free month's trial and then 25% off for the first 3 months. Head to ecom1.com pricing and complete the inquiry form, and we will connect our listeners to the Pricing team. Right, let's head straight back to the episode.
Big software used to go in and say, it's going to cost this amount, and it was a big number. And SMB software went in and said, well, the headline rate is really small, but if you want X, Y, and Z, these are all the add-ons. And then the app stores that they force you to use a payment provider or a cross-border or an email, and they get big rev shares off of those. And so, you kind of come from two different spots, but you end up in a very similar one, which generally favors the platform. And so this pricing thing is a really big lever that we play. And frankly, we win when it comes to the mid-market merchant.
Yeah, I mean, it's very frustrating when you see these headline numbers of X amount a month or X amount for this. We had a similar experience a couple of days ago. A potential tech partner wanted to work with one of our clients. Or with our clients, and they did a lunch and learn to our team with their pricing, and obviously their overview of the platform, and a very good lunch and learn about that tech. And then we introduced them to a client, and it transpired that, the pricing wasn't really what they presented to us for the full fat version, if you like. So I was like, oh man! So we got one of the guys came to see me. He said, well, I've introduced him to our client, a very good client of ours, and it's twice the price as what we were led to believe on the initial sort of lunch and learn. So that's probably going to be a very short-lived relationship, unfortunately, unless that can just be just be very straight on the pricing. But yeah, stacking all these different add-ons and bolt-ons can be very frustrating.
The market, the software providers have really done a good job confusing the market. So the first thing we talked about is the fact that there's 18 people who think they can do what you need. So how do you choose? The second thing is you now have to think about, well, do I want I have to think about the delivery method. Do I need SaaS? Do I need a platform as a service, or do I need to manage this myself? Well, that's another confusing topic. The other topic that's confusing is going to be around architecture. Do I need a full stack? Do I need just the components? What's the most modern? Like, what do I actually need? And then, you've got a skill set gap. Do you want to do something that's fully controllable via an admin, or do you want pure APIs? And so the amount of complexity and choice, along with the complexity and choice of pricing, really, really makes it hard for a mid-market merchant to kind of cut through the noise. So a lot of this market confusion benefits the commerce or the software companies. And our goal is to try and cut through that noise and really provide a lot cleaner options so people know what they're choosing.
Yeah, I guess. So if you're a mid-market merchant listening to this now, what would your advice be? They're maybe looking at, what's next for them in terms of, replatforming, architecture, tech stack. They're maybe sitting at 10 mil, knowing full well that they're board and team are looking to scale to 50 mil over the next 3 or 4 years, what advice would you give to those guys?
Yeah, without being too self-serving, I really think that you got to get multiple points of view on, your problem. And I'm a big proponent of using, so let me say it really plainly. Software companies are relatively desperate for your business. 2023 for the industry was a relatively tough year. It's probably the lowest amount of companies re-platformed off of something different to something new in the last 20 years. Okay?
Yeah.
The net effect of that is a bunch of bad behaviors. A bunch of software companies trying to answer RFPs and taking a little bit more, being a little more liberal with the process and saying, yes, that's in the box. When I know for a fact, in a lot of cases, it's not.
Yeah. Okay.
And we do our best to really hold the line and try and be as honest and open as we can. One of the things I would ask for, or I would tell people, is find a trusted advisor, an agency or someone with experience that you can lean on and make sure that they can help you sort out all of these answers. That's point one. Point two is any contract you sign with a technology partner, get a failure to launch provision. If they are being honest and open with you about their ability to serve your needs and aren't willing to sign up that they've answered all these answers correctly and they're willing to say that if it doesn't go well, you're not going to pay us, question whether they're doing it, what the incentives are driving what behavior. So those would be the two pieces of advice. And obviously the third is you should include Shopware in your evaluation. Just to be purely self-serving. Let's go.
No, I think the first two are brilliant advice.
I thought you might have.
No, we have many clients on Shopware. But yeah, obviously having that trusted advisor and getting different viewpoints, spending time, obviously at that level, it's not just we're just getting started and let's figure this out. It's a huge decision. So getting, spending, we're working with a client at the moment and they've been working on a sort of their next step for about a year. They're on a custom build. They're doing about £25 million, probably $30 million a year. They're on a custom build. They've been with a long time, good relationship with the company that built that, but they're looking for their next step. So they've spent about a year, I think now, and I think there's still a fair way to go. I'm not saying it will take that long for everybody, but there's a lot of things to consider. They're sort of quite unique in that they've got something like 250,000 SKUs. A lot of different products, a lot of B2B and B2C mixed in. So sort of planning for that. But yeah, getting that advice, getting multiple viewpoints, and obviously people ideally that have been there and done it, not just, are trying to sell the software and hopefully it might do this. And then that failure to launch provision, that's a great one, isn't it? Obviously that's nothing like signing a few legal documents to get a rocket under things and then make yeah.
Yep.
So, okay, so I think one of the challenges can be, trying to convince the management, convince the people with the purse strings about the investment in the technology for that next phase. We've got to the 5 to 10 mil, and now we're right. Okay, we now know we need to invest, X, a considerable figure into the next stage of growth. How can senior managers get buy-in, from their management, from their owners of their business? Absolutely.
And in fact, I've seen this in spades in the last 3-4 weeks when Shopify raised their prices by 30% and are now charging for B2B and now charging more for payments. We've had more, what's the economic impact of moving conversations than we've had in a long time. And so I think you're exactly right that the evaluation period has gone on in 2023 for a long time. I think that was more of a byproduct of the cost of capital, the cost of labor, the cost of products and services. I think, and who knows with what inflation. And so those factors generally focused a lot of people on pausing. Uncertainty equals pause. But now those price raises, all those previous evaluations, they're all starting to hit right now. And so, I believe that a migration or an upgrade to a modern commerce stack actually should be self-funding. And over a, let's say, a 5-year period. And so the amount of money that you'll save on licensing costs and not being on vendor lock-ins and all of these things should be enough to pay the level of effort on the migration. And you should result in a modern platform that solves your needs on an economic model that you can go forward. The thing you've got to get comfortable with is that period of transition and making sure there's a return on your aggravation for doing. And so that's that return on aggravation period that you described as a year at your vendor you're talking about.
Yeah,
I've seen that be accelerated, at least here in North America, as merchants are coming out of some uncertainty into more clear direction.
Yeah, I mean, there does seem to be a lot more. I would say last year, it was a bit of a shocker, wasn't it? I think is the reality of sort of bigger investments on replatforming. Whereas as I'm seeing a lot more positivity right now. Obviously, this episode's going to go live sort of mid-March 24, and I think I'm seeing a lot more bigger decisions. But still, they can be quite tricky conversations when their head of digital or their head of growth, depending on how that company's structured, is going to their board for what might be, obviously it varies, but, trying to think of a number to say, but, maybe a couple of $1 million for a website, maybe more, maybe less, maybe a lot less. But when you talk about that 5-year period, that's a good way to frame it, isn't it? I think, to look at, that the sort of the timeline and look at the cost of other platforms over that time and look at trying to phase in different elements. It's quite a good way of looking at it, isn't it?
Yeah, it needs to be self-funding. The efficiencies gained through moving to a modern commerce platform that has AI and spatial commerce and just digital sales rooms and rules and flow builders, you should be able to pay less, and you should be able to leverage modern tools to do things that use people today. And I don't mean to be so cold and callous about it, but, I had a meeting this week with a merchant who has a dedicated team trying to do integrations into making sure their commerce and their HubSpot talk to make all these things happen. Well, in a modern commerce platform that's built on webhooks as a natural part of the way their product is built, that's a field in a commerce platform that makes all this stuff happen automatically versus 3 or 4 people that have to push a bunch of emails around and systems around. So to me, e-commerce upgrades should be self-funding. And the other real question, if you don't mind, Richard, there's another point I wanted to make and I forgot. The critical question to ask is, when did your commerce platform, what was it originally built? And the reason this really matters, I used to work at this company called Digital River, and it was one of the first multi-tenant SaaS commerce platforms in the world. 2003, okay, we were multi-tenant SaaS. And by about 2007 or 2008, we were having to make really hard trade-offs around refactoring the code or delivering new features, okay? And these platforms that are in the space today were built before iPhones. They were built before social media. They were built before all these use cases. And so to serve the agility of the market takes them to refactor. And so this is another reason that we haven't got a lot of new features in our industry for years. It's because these platforms that are really, really good, they were built a long time ago. And I'm sure everyone on this phone doesn't have an iPhone 7, but they're running on commerce platforms that were built the same year as that.
Yeah, that's people just don't realize, do they? There's quite a lot of band-aids being put over various things. I think there is a term, I don't know if to say this or not, but you can only polish a turd so much, can't you, really?
Leave it to a Brit. That's I like it.
Okay, so it's an interesting, I think, I've been having a lot of conversations this last month or two, or last month really, with a lot of sort of 20, 40 million pound merchants. What would you say around sort of, shopware, your roadmap? what you mentioned, digital sales rooms. I think that's quite an interesting one. What are some of the features coming down the roadmap at the moment that you've got planned out?
Yeah, well, I'll answer that, but I'm a storyteller. I'll hopefully appreciate that, being British. When I took the job at Shopware, what I had realized in my old life is we had partnered with all the major commerce platforms, BigCommerce, SAP, Salesforce, you name it. And my old company and I used to help them win new merchants and utilize Digital River's merchant and seller of record capabilities to go to every country in the world. And when I was on the journey helping them sell new customers with us, I realized that the products didn't change at all. There was no new features and no innovation. And so Shopware, I guess, recognized this before I got there, and we raised $100 million with Carlyle and PayPal to do two things. Number one, take this market-leading product in Germany to the rest of the world. And number two, bring back feature innovation to the merchants. And so I'm really excited about the product roadmap because we've delivered things like Rule and Flow Builder, which are these unbelievably simple to run but complex on the back end that just crushes it, which allows you to basically the death of personas. So it's not about what football mom Fanny does around, how we've profiled her. It's really around, she visited this page, she opted into this thing, she bought this product, she deserves to get this rate and this offer. So it's really this unbelievably complicated if-then statement, which leads to the flow that you want to deliver for her experience. So this is really enormously powerful because it allows merchants to be way more efficient in the way they merchandise and manage their stores. So that's one example. Another is this digital sales room, Richard. I don't know if you've seen a demo of it, but it is going to do to e-commerce what telehealth has done to healthcare. In the United States, we've got a different system than you do it in the UK. I'm sure we could debate its merits either way. But now in America, when you need a doctor's appointment, the first thing they try to do is to get you in a telehealth appointment to visit your physician. In commerce today, in B2B, it's more common that people are on the road visiting the dentist's office versus trying to use the power of digital sales rooms to visit the long tail of their customer base and romance the products and give them the service levels that they need. And this digital sales room has done what most other technologies hasn't. It's changed sales reps' behavior. This is a tool that they adopt because it helps them hit their number, not a tool that's been mandated by corporate so that they can have better reporting. And so this is a really good example of not innovation, not a product looking for a solution, but a solution that has found a product.
Yeah. I love it.
So those are two examples.
Yeah, I think digital sales rooms, it sort of gives me all sorts of brings up all sorts of ideas, being able to demo different things that, to bring in that sort of in-store experience to your from room, bringing obviously all the omni-channel together. It's quite an exciting, more of a touchy-feely sort of interaction. Yeah, it's
Exactly.
good. It's good. Yeah. Well,
another thing I want to add, because you got me all excited about product roadmap. So one other thing that I think is really differentiating is ask your e-commerce providers to show a link to their product roadmap. And the reason most companies don't do it is because of what I described earlier around the refactoring. It is easy to promise on a PowerPoint and then slip. Okay? Shopware actually publishes our product roadmap publicly. And it connects into our Jira system at which we actually run and deliver products and features. And so we deliver 90% of the features that we say we're going to on time and the other 10% within a month. And the fact that we do it publicly, I think is very differentiating.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to maybe link that roadmap up to the episode.
That'd be wonderful. I'll give you some links.
Well, thanks, Jason. So I like to finish every episode with a book recommendation. Do you have a book to recommend to our listeners?
I'm a very simple man. So my favorite book is this book called Who Moved My Cheese? And it was the first book ever given to me when I started in e-commerce 24 years ago. And basically talking about, so my previous company's job was to really disintermediate companies like Best Buy having a software category in their stores. And it took 24 years, but it's now gone. But the whole premise was around how do you deal with change management, and how do you disintermediate, and how do you do complex things that really kind of change. That's really about disruption in a lot of ways and change management. And I really enjoy that book. Simple, very simple read.
It's a quick read as well, isn't it? It's only like this.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm a simple man.
So thank you for coming on the show. For those that want to find out more about Shopware, maybe connect with you directly, what's the best way to do that?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Jason Nyhus, Nyhus. And I would ask that you'd send me an actual note, not just a LinkedIn request. I'd love to know who I'm trying to connect with. You could also email me at j.nyhus@shopware.com, or visit our website and interact with our product roadmap and some of the features I talked about today.
Yep, great stuff. We'll link that all up in the show notes. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Jason. Cheers.
Really enjoyed it. Awesome. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. If you enjoyed this episode, hit the subscribe or follow button wherever you are listening to this podcast, so you're always the first to know when a new episode is released. Have a fantastic day, and I'll see you on the next one.